Welcome to Stardust Stereo. I'm Parker McPhinney. I'm your host. Today is the 21st of May, year 2025. In today's episode, I'm going to speak on Saturn entering into the zodiac sign of Aries. This happens on the 24th of May, in a few days, and yes, it's huge. Whenever a slow-moving planet shifts signs, it changes what becomes, in the case of Saturn, important to you. And especially if you happen to have your sun sign also in Aries, you become much more aware of Father Time. I don't care how many numbers you've added to your life, you still become aware of the passing of time because Saturn represents Father Time, and in the sign of Aries, it seems to be going fast or faster. Saturn represents what we take seriously. And so therefore, that's why when Saturn enters into the sign of your birth sun sign, your outlook can be much more determined, respectful, adhering to responsibility, and aware of the passing of time. Everyone, no matter when you were born, will be affected by the movement of Saturn into Aries. Some sun signs will do really well. Others will feel the restraints of responsibility. It all depends on how Saturn is also placed in your chart. This is something that many astrologers do not talk about because there's so much to talk about in astrology, you'd never shut up. And Saturn in Aries, in your birth chart, I'll go through the wheel of some of the areas you might want to take a closer look at. While Saturn's in Aries, which will be 2.5 years, however, Saturn does do a dip back into Pisces in the fall. The specific dates of when Saturn will be in the sign of Aries are, it begins this latest journey on May 24th until September 1st. On September 1st of this year, Saturn will return to Pisces for a few months, or for several months actually. Then on February 13th, 2026, it will re-enter Aries, and it will stay in that sign until April 12th, 2028. So we're just getting a little taste of it from now until the beginning of September. And during this period, this first get-go of Saturn in Aries, it will create some really dynamite configurations with the other outer planets. But first, before I mention that, I want to just talk about Saturn in Aries and what it might stir in you, no matter when you're born. Saturn in Aries is about controlling your anger and developing your discipline. Saturn in Aries is like an anvil that is used to forge a metal and make it smooth or mold it into something useful. So we can think about Aries in Saturn, or Saturn traveling in Aries, as what do we wish to mold ourselves into newly? What new avenue do we wish to create for ourselves? How much discipline is going to be needed for that? Where is our discipline for not getting angry with others or ourselves? It represents young leaders and hotheads that feel frustrated because they're stuck in not enough experience. It's about new ground that is created from volcanoes coming from the earth upward, shooting out fire. So we're going to see some new land structures from volcanoes that no doubt will be letting their presence known, even if they've been dormant for hundreds of years. So it creates a new landscape. Sometimes a new landscape is created through building. So it represents what we build, what new structure we want to build using traditional ideas, but maybe the design is unique. An interesting configuration that's going to happen quite rapidly is that Saturn will conjunct with Neptune. And Saturn with Neptune, the planet Neptune, brings structure and imagination. That's actually considered the architect's symbolism, Saturn and Neptune, because you can build something, but is it beautiful? You need your imagination to make it fantastic. But we can apply this same theory with anything in our life. Saturn also has an element of creating limits, boundaries, defining the area that you can operate in, new laws, dealing with boundaries, what is now acceptable, changing the laws to create new limitations, which sometimes can feel very scary because Aries with Saturn is the authoritarian. And I know in America, everybody's freaking out about Trump's energy and how he utilizes that energy. I mean, he's a, I know what I want and now I'm going to go do it sort of personality. It is interesting to me that on this eve of Saturn moving into Aries, we have in the headlines the former FBI director under crosshairs because of taking a picture of some numbers in the sand, which I'm not going to say what they mean. I don't want my podcast shut down. Let's just say they weren't favorable to the leader of America. And, you know, all I could think was, what a stupid post for this former FBI leader to post. I mean, it is reckless. It's absolutely reckless, no matter how you feel about the president. That is reckless. And I mention this because as Saturn moves forward, as it does so, Jupiter will be entering Cancer. So Jupiter moseys on along, and then at one point, Jupiter and Saturn will square. That's a dynamite aspect. Their square also happens to take place on the same day that Mars in the sky will be squaring Uranus. That is super explosive. This happens on June 15th. Jupiter will square Saturn, and then Mars on the same day will square Uranus. This happens within 24 hours after Trump's birthday. That means this dynamic energy will be in his solar return chart, which actually happens on the 13th. Still, that energy will be in his chart for his entire solar return year. But the fact that it's so close to his birthday, these intense, violent energy, big opinionated, explosive. It's not a good sign. With energy like this, you have to have an outlet. I'll be doing a specific podcast about these two configurations that happen on June 15th later. Of course, it's not limited to Trump. It's going to affect the world, indicating the potential for great violence. Especially so because Mars in Trump's chart is right on the ascendant. So it'll be returning. He'll be having actually a Mars return right around his birthday. None of this made me feel good. And then, the former director comes out with this Looney Tune post looking at the current climate of nutcases out there. Even if I don't like the guy, I'm for peace. If something were to happen to him, this would not be good for America. Violence is never the answer. And I did a little bit of research. And Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy had their demise when Saturn was in Aries. This is not to say that this will happen to Trump, but there is no doubt in my mind that he is in grave danger, and I have said this many times. And so the former leader of the FBI posting that image was just unacceptable. I don't care how you feel about the president. It is unacceptable. Violence never solves problems. And the former FBI leader needs to be reprimanded because he knows better. And that's not how we use Saturn entering into Aries. Like I said, it's about discipline and dealing with your anger. Maturity. Now, how do we want to use this energy? We want to use this energy to have bright new ideas because Aries deals with the head, Saturn deals with structure and longevity. And so we want to mastermind things that will excel forward what will be helpful. The great news is that when Saturn enters Aries, it will be moving to make a fabulous relationship with in the sky Pluto, which is in Aquarius. It indicates choices and structures that transform the collective, strengths in groups, new friendships, or old friendships that start anew. That's the potential when Saturn sextiles Pluto. When Saturn squares Jupiter, I'm right and you're wrong attitude. That's not conducive to a flowing conversation, and it's dangerous. Young men who feel boxed in will be extremely frustrated and looking for a release of that masculine energy in ways that are productive and are held in esteem of safekeeping. I think of our soldiers. We have armies for protection. So there may be a new call to shore up our armies. I actually happen to be a pacifist, so I'm not for any war, but I recognize that this does not have strong rooting in our world right now. Another component can be new attitudes toward elders. See, it's a blending of this Aries sign, the first sign of the zodiac, and Saturn, which represents father time and elders and getting older. People are living longer. So we do need a new attitude of how how we help our elders find new excitement in the world. Saturn rules teeth, bones, your spine. It's possible we make breakthroughs in those areas of how we can enhance and have durability with our bones since we're living longer and our teeth. Another imagery that came to me when Saturn and Neptune create the conjunction, even if it's not exact, it will still be felt. I got an imagery of praying on your knees and strengthening your faith, the foundation of your faith. When Saturn has a favorable relationship with Uranus as it moves into Gemini, which will happen in July, that is when I'm most excited, because that will really set the stage for new energy, the next generation taking over, allowing their ideas to begin to flourish. The world never stops growing. If you have a garden, you know this fact. If you don't pay attention to your garden and shift where you put your crops, the soil gets depleted. In the world, we need to have the elders step aside so that the new generation can take over and bring their ideas of what they want in the world. Nothing is static. Everything is constantly changing. One of the downsides of Saturn in Aries is it can bring depression. We might find that if we take the action of Aries, it will help us to move out of a depressed state. I know that to be a fact. When you're in the zone of, oh, the world sucks, you've got to move your body. And soon, once you're moving, a new freshness comes into the mind, new possibilities, and like passing clouds, that wet blanket energy has dried off and the blanket has flown away and you are moving again. Solitude also is represented by Saturn, and with it in the sign Aries, we can perhaps discover that if we have a substantial amount of alone time, we can then begin to come up with new ideas for our lives, new paths. So often I see that people are afraid to spend any time introspective or alone. And that is truly when the higher mind can be tapped into and you can discover how rich you really are with possibilities, and that whatever problem you have, there is a solution. So on May 24th, 2025 at 8:36 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, Saturn will move into Aries. And as it does, we can put on our smart thinking caps to envision how we can become more responsible, more able to have endurance to deal with the new issues that come up. We can be our own architects and designing the life that we want by the small choices that we do on a regular basis. Now I'm going to go rather quickly through the wheel. The natural wheel. The natural wheel is when Aries at 0 degrees starts the 12 pi wheel of astrology. So if you were born with an Aries rising or Aries sun sign, Saturn in your first house, that's going to slow you down a little bit. That's going to make you retrospective. It's going to make you aware of your limitations on the physical body. The great antidote to that is just perseverance and not focusing on what you can't do, but figuring out new ways to do what you used to do. But the body won't comply now. So you just figure out a new path. Second house, that's dealing with your finances. You will need to reevaluate where your money is stuck, how you can generate deeper savings. If you're in a job that you feel bored with, it's time to either have the courage to begin to look for a different job or find a newness within the job you have. And it's also a time when you don't want to cow to responsibility. You want to step up to the plate for your duty. Third house. This is when the responsibility with brothers and sisters, your duty in the community, how you can join your community together, how you can be a leader in the community. That is the area that you need to focus on. Also, it's dealing with your car, because third house is transportation. So if Saturn goes through your third house, you need to look at the longevity of your car and what parts need to be replaced, and not ignore little repairs. Do maintenance, do that oil change. Third house also deals with your thinking. So what way have you made a habit of thinking in a certain way that might be against your best interest? What's holding you back? Examine that. Fourth house, that's when you shore up the foundation of your physical home with new repairs, new technology. If your parents are still alive, you check in and delegate the responsibility that the elders may need, especially the mother of the family. The fourth house is also the seat of the soul. A good question to always ask is, what is my purpose in being here? What do I want my legacy to be? No matter what your age is, what are you marching for? Fifth house deals with children. How can I create boundaries? Saturn's always about boundaries that don't limit my children's freedom, but still give them safety. Fifth house is also the creative house. So you need to take a look at various disciplines in your medium of whatever way you create, and how approaching a old technique that you do in a new way can kind of refresh your creativity. Sixth house is the house of health. If Saturn's in your sixth house, you need to pay great attention to your bones, your spine, your teeth. Don't put off that dental exam. You know, the teeth not being taken care of is tied to the heart. Try a new exercise plan. In the job, when Saturn goes through that sixth house in Aries, you will have new responsibilities and you may not get paid for that extra work, but in the long run, it will pay off. Seventh house is partnerships. As Saturn goes into that house in Aries, looking for a new way to create a long-term healthy partnership. Often with Saturn in the seventh house, we get tired of our partnership and we want to zap it up and make it interesting. And the only way to continue in a long-term partnership and not get bored is to challenge your partner to try new things, and you yourself try new things. That infuses new energy within the individuals, and that new energy brings a new dynamic to the partnership. Now, the seventh house also happens to be, and I always find this very funny, the house of open enemies. When you're inviting new people into your life, get to know them fairly well before you give them the house keys, you know. We don't always see people for who they are when we first meet them. It takes a period of time to discover what their character is. Also, with Saturn in the 7th house, you can meet an older person that seems younger, and especially as Aries is going through Saturn. 8th house, Saturn in the 8th house in Aries, all about transformation. How do I transcend my difficulties? How do I transcend and transform myself through ideas that come in my consciousness when I'm meditating, when I'm dealing with my debts? How can I have a new, healthy approach to getting debt-free? 8th house is a very complicated house. It deals with sex, death, taxes, and other people's money. All of those areas will have an opportunity to explore a new attitude about them, a healthier attitude about them, a new approach. If I feel like I'm not getting what I need, how can I use responsibly a new dialogue, a new plan to make things more exciting if I'm bored with my partner of 40 years in the intimate area? So it's about taking responsibility for yourself and what you bring to those intimate relationships. Not doing the blame game, but again, Aries Saturn always is about, what can I do? That's where the action is. How can I help this? 9th house, beliefs, travel, higher education, looking at the choices I make right now that are going to create my livelihood in the future. Are my belief systems needing a review of my dedication to them? Do I meditate once a day or do I meditate once a month? What would happen if I meditated once a day? 10th house. Saturn loves to be in the 10th house. So if you have Saturn traveling through your 10th house and it's in Aries, you can show your leadership side. You have an opportunity. Of course, that means you have to take more responsibility, but you have a great place to where you can start a whole new mission in your life, a whole new calling. You can bring all the experience that you've had in your life thus far and bring that, embrace that to a new position. It's also about taking care of dad, the father, looking to see if the elders in the family need help, and especially the father. How can I make his work not as difficult? 11th house, friendships. This is where Saturn in Aries definitely is. You can restart an old friendship by bringing a newness to it, looking at the good of having long-term ties, but bringing a freshness into it. 11th house deals with long-term hopes and wishes as well. And so it may mean that you scrap the old plan of your future and you start anew. 11th house deals with groups. So new leadership in old groups. Democratic Party, please pay attention. Saturn in Aries wants to bring a new canon to old establishments. 12th house. That's the house of the retreat, the cave, the area in which we recharge our batteries. Saturn in Aries in that house is a new commitment, making new commitments to your spirituality, your spiritual path. If you were born with Saturn and a fabulous relationship in your chart, as Saturn moves through Aries, even when it's making hard aspects to other planets, you will fare better because You are used to Saturn's energy and you have acclimated it into your life in a positive way. Also, with that 12th house, you can view solitude in a new way. There's an opportunity, and also to look at your dreams. What is your subconscious telling you? Listen up. One last factor I want to bring into this entire very long podcast is, where is Mars during all this? Because Mars is the ruler of Aries. So as Saturn is going through the zodiac sign Aries, we have to look at where Mars is. And Mars changes signs fairly fast. So right now Mars is in Leo. While it's in Leo, which will be until the 18th of June 2025, Mars is in Leo. So while Mars is in Leo, during this period of Saturn marching into Aries, take responsibility for yourself. Take determination as your best friend. Be positive. Be active. Go for what you want. Don't be a complainer. Don't allow yourself to get into the complaining habit. It's this person's fault. It's that person's fault. No, it's so-and-so's fault. My life is so horrible because of so-and-so. Yeah, people do really horrible things, but we are responsible for our journey on Earth. And the only time we can really, truly do something positive is when we take action that we know will move our itinerary forward. And then we will be happy. And then we bring happiness to the world with us. And we bring happiness and we share that happiness with everybody. And that helps. That's contagious. They absorb that. So when you complain and you let yourself get bogged down about what's not happening, that does not help your world or anybody else's. Discipline of mind, discipline of thought, not feeding anger, controlling anger. Get busy creating the life you want through discipline, duty, and responsibility. And you will be rewarded. Because Saturn always rewards. And you might just be rewarded in a way you had never thought possible. I'm Parker McPhinney. This is Stardust Stereo. Thank you for listening. I'd like to thank my patrons. You know who you are. If you'd like to become a patron, you can do so on patreon.com/ParkerMcP. If you become a patron, you will get written material that nobody else gets, and you will get these podcasts right when they're produced. And I want to remind you, you are made of stardust. So go shine.